A small but important word was left out at the beginning of the second reading that Jane read from Galatians. It's the word but. Paul is contrasting something there. When he says in the fullness of time Christ came born of a woman, it's not like God had to get ready for this or Jesus had to get ready for this. What made it the right time was we were ready for it. We were ready to grow up. What happens in the full passage is Paul contrasts being a child with being a grown-up. Only grown-ups can inherit. You have to be of a certain age in order to become an heir. That's the point he's making there. Well, I've gotten very interested in growing up in maturity over the last couple of years. Largely because I'm old now. And I've never been old before, and so I want to get it right. And it turns out that all the books on how to do old right say it's a big help if you grew up before you got old. If you've had certain mature qualities that you got in midlife. So I've been kind of studying on that. And I'd like to share with you 3 qualities that I think mature people have based on what I've been reading in Ron Rolheiser and Joan Chittister. First thing about growing up that's pretty true is it's probably going to hurt. The gospel reading we just heard is pretty much the same as we heard on Christmas Day, except one verse is added about Jesus being circumcised. So there's already this note of blood and of pain. Last Monday, we had the feast of St. Stephen, the day after Christmas, the first martyr. 3 days later, we had the Feast of the Holy Innocents. So I think it would be true to say of Jesus that he had to grow up fast. He and his parents were refugees. They were fleeing violence when he was still a very small child. So it's easy to get fixed on the kind of cuddlier features of Christmas, but the church kind of insists that we say, well, no, that doesn't really last all that long. Eventually you have to grow up, and growing up often involves dealing with pain, and the fact that the world can be a hard place is a very hard place for a lot of the people who live in it. Second feature about growing up that I think is important is what do you do when you realize that it hurts and things haven't gone well? Well, I'm told, and I'm still working on this myself, that when mature people realize that things have not turned out all that well, they don't figure out whose fault it is and blame them. And say, if you had just done what you were supposed to, this would have been fine, I would have been happy. It's all your fault, and I'm going to sit and pout until you shape up. Whatever you can say about making that choice in midlife to blame somebody or some group of people for all your problems, it gets real difficult if you're old. There you are, you're old, and you're still waiting to begin your life until people do what they're supposed to. Well, there's no time to lose. You better get moving if you're going to have a life at all. Some older people I've known were pretty unhappy and pretty bitter because it was beginning to dawn on them that they had spent most of their time waiting for other people to shape up. And you know how other people are, how stubborn they are, how foolish they are, how unwilling to listen they are. So I think it's far better if you say sometimes things are disappointing and you don't blame anybody. You don't even blame yourself. And of course, this is why we blame other people. Because if it's got to be somebody's fault, it's either them or us, and it sure can't be us, so et cetera, et cetera. How about if you don't blame anybody and just say sometimes life is difficult, sometimes life is painful. Sometimes even if everybody acts with the best of intentions, the results are disappointing. Go on from there. And then finally, what grown-up people do. Sometimes people will get as far as saying, okay, I'm going to let you off this one time for not doing what you were supposed to. But from now on, let's be clear on this, I get my way. You need to do what I think you should do so things can turn out the way I think they should turn out. I was on a 12-step retreat a couple of months ago and heard of an interchange. New members said, well, I'm really having trouble getting a relationship with a higher power going because things just don't turn out my way. And the wise person who heard this said, don't have a way. Let go of your way of thinking that it should be. That's a good way to get through midlife, and it certainly is a good way to get through aging. Instead of thinking that things should be a certain way, you can kind of take the way things are. Reading a book about aging the other day, and it said, it's a great time to focus on the present. What's here, what's now? Can you deal with that? Can you find it to be grateful for that? And of course, in all this, I think it's a real good thing that we're remembering Mary today. I think she was a very, very grown-up person. Like her son, she had to grow up fast. She was asked at a very young age if she was willing to become the mother of the Messiah. All the events around his birth made pretty clear to her that it was going to hurt. She was willing to do it God's way. On the 8th day, her son was circumcised. She and Joseph, her husband, observed the law. So Mary behaved in a real grown-up way. And if you're thinking of making resolutions, you could do worse than adopting the resolutions that seem to have shaped Mary's course, her spiritual growth over time. There's a line in the gospel today that Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart, reflected on them. The two words there are both Greek words that begin with the prefix syn. It's pretty common in a lot of words in English. Synthesis, symphony. It means you take two things and put them together. First thing that Mary did was she paid attention a lot. She noticed things. That would be a real good resolution for the new year, especially in our endlessly distracted culture. The whole purpose of the internet is to keep us completely distracted so we'll buy things we don't need. That's what it's for. So it takes considerable effort to, like Mary, pay attention, put things together and say, okay, here's Simeon telling me it's going to hurt. Here's Hannah telling me it's going to hurt. I bet it's going to hurt. Putting things together without being distracted, that's a good resolution, that you're going to pay more attention in the new year. The other thing Mary does, when it says she pondered or reflected on this, the Greek word means she threw things together. She tossed things together in her consciousness. Grown-ups know that you can have two opposite ideas in your head at the same time. And that sometimes that's a very good way to go. So Mary threw some ideas together. Great joy that the shepherds brought. Great sadness because it's going to hurt. And she could keep both those ideas in her head at the same time. And that really helped her to grow into the mother of the church, into a great disciple. A book I've found very helpful about how to grow up is Ron Rolheiser's book, Sacred Fire. He's got a list of 10 qualities of the mature person that I've gotten lots of use out of. He singles out Mary as an example of one quality of the mature person, which I plan to take with me into this new year. He says that a mature person can take in bad stuff, pain, envy, fear, anger, hatred, can be on the receiving end of that and can throw it together inside with some other things. And instead of putting out what they've taken in, this negative stuff, they can put out something completely different. They, by a kind of spiritual alchemy, they can turn anger and fear into comfort, into joy, into blessing. And that's what I think Mary was really, really good at. She could throw different things together and produce out of them things that really, really help people.